Hello again, everyone. I'm Eric Sperling. Thank you so much for joining All in Education's second season of Sepas. I'd like to welcome today's experts. We have Stephanie Parra. She is the Executive Director at All in Education. Luis Avila, he is the founder and president of Iconico Campaigns. And Adriana Marietta, she is the president of the Pharaohs Foundation. A little bit about All in Education. It is a local nonprofit organization that exists to build an Arizona where all communities have access to opportunity and justice. Now, their work is focused on strengthening the Latino community by closing the representation gap to build power, influence, and authority across Arizona boardrooms and classrooms. Through Sepas, All in Education has been working to bridge their advocacy efforts to be inclusive of multiple factors outside of the classroom that are impacting the educational outcomes of students. They're calling these factors the social determinants of education. Now, the focus of Sepas is on having real, thought-provoking conversations with leaders and community members and identifying solutions to work towards creating meaningful changes in the systems meant to serve our communities. This season will exclusively focus on the issue of poverty, the social determinant of education that, through an analysis, All in Education found was the leading factor that had the greatest negative impact on the welfare of families, communities, students, and schools. So today, the conversation will be exploring a topic that may generate a lot of discussion and potentially will not generate an answer. Now, that is because when we try to define a quality school and quality education, there are a lot of factors, qualities, and issues that impact this definition. It is also dependent on the unique needs of a state, region, community, and can even be as granular as the individual needs of a student. So with that, let's get into our panel. And Stephanie, the first question will be for you. So I'm doing this introduction here, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, All in Education, choosing to try to define what a quality education is when it seems like there's so many factors that can impact how to define it, seems like a huge undertaking.
It is a very huge undertaking, but I think for us it was important to begin to unpack the conversation, because it is one thing that we say as educators is that our kids deserve the best quality education in every single neighborhood. And when we talk about that, what does that mean? And to us, non-negotiable is academic achievement. That has to be at the top. Our students need to be able to read proficiently, do math proficiently, graduate, go on to college, attain at high rates. But there are also, when we started to unpack this conversation with our community stakeholders, what we heard from families is that to them, a quality education means a welcoming face to welcome them at their schoolhouse. It means a teacher who has strong communication and relationship with them, a principal who cares about their family's needs. It means that their kids have access to tutoring and extracurricular activities. And so we wanted to elevate this conversation because we think that our community should help us define what it means when we say that we want our kids to have access to quality.
Sure, and Luis, thank you so much for being here as the founder of All in Education. How do you envision the organization serving the community?
Well, one of the most important things that we thought about when creating All in Education was that we needed a space for us to define what quality meant. For too long, decisions have been made on education that weren't including those most impacted by social inequities. So All in Education is not only an organization that is trying to carve out the space to have the conversations, but also to have the influence to advance those conversations. And the way that I define it sometimes is that we get to actually imagine the future we want. So we get to imagine what quality education looks like. You know, it might include families who say it's a welcoming face, but we also know that in the jobs of the future, we're going to need kids to know about STEM, and we're going to need kids to learn more about AI and other technologies. So we really need to imagine that future ourselves and think about how do we bend the present to make that a reality. And I think that's what All in Education is all about. It's not just working with families and educating them on the system and how it works, but ensuring that we affect that system so that it produces the results that we want for our community.
Fantastic. Adriana, let's ask you now, because you've been a part of a lot of these conversations. You work in education, you work in philanthropy. So how would you help us define a quality school, a quality education? How can that help us kind of shift the system a little bit?
Yeah, well, I think it really all goes back to community. I think we need to really step away from philanthropy and grassroots leading the conversation on what communities need, and we need to take it to our communities. And this is why the work that All in Education is so important to us as a foundation. We go to them who are closely connected to the community to identify what those are. Clearly, academic achievement without a doubt. Our students have to be ready to attend higher education, whatever it is they choose to go to college or technical education, they have to be ready. But we also have to talk to parents, and we have to find out what is it that makes a school part of a community where they feel that they belong.
And you know, Stephanie, we've been talking about poverty all season on Paque Sepas. Help us catch up a little bit on how poverty can impact the quality of schools.
Certainly. So, you know, children that are growing up in poverty, one thing we've talked about is they are the needs that a community has, the needs that a child has and that families have will show up with them when they show up to school. You know, we're in the middle of back to school season. Kids are deciding and parents are deciding where to send their kids and getting ready. It's such an exciting time of the year. But a family that's been navigating poverty all summer, you know, they might be dealing with heat exhaustion.
Yeah.
They might be dealing with food insecurity. And so those issues, housing instability, those issues are going to show up with children and families when they show up on the school doorstep. And so schools have to be prepared to provide additional support. And one thing we've talked about is that we've expected schools serving low-income communities to operate as social service agencies for far too long, right? And they're not equipped or resourced to do it well. And so we have to move away from these Band-Aid fixes and approaches to supporting children and families and have a more holistic approach. And that's what the poverty conversation is really designed to do for us. We want to have a conversation where you have people who are making decisions about how to invest resources or how to direct bus routes, that they are well informed about the community perspective and how the issues of poverty are impacting families, and ultimately how that will impact a child's ability and readiness to learn on the first day of school.
Yeah, great perspective there. A lot of families dealing with issues of poverty, and then school starts all of a sudden, and you've got to adjust. Luis, with your work, the social justice work in different and cross-sector that you've been involved with, can you describe some of the barriers that you see, some of the challenges to having some of these families and these students achieve a quality education?
I mean, it does go back to inequality, and unfortunately, we have created a system that allows for these inequalities. Now, starting at the household, for example, right now in these record-breaking heat waves in the desert, electricity bills are, for some families unattainable. We're paying $400, $500, $600 in houses where their income might be a minimum wage. So really, wages do not meet the needs and the moment of inflation and an economy that is insecure, and in an economy that is mostly based in service, where families in our community, a lot of them work in this sector as well. So starting at the household, the households are already struggling seasonally in the state of Arizona. But then after that, when we look at communities, right, we're thinking about places where there is declining enrollment because families are moving away from school. So schools are having a hard time actually keeping students in the classroom because one, they don't have the quality, two, they don't have the teachers, three, they don't have the resources. So we are seeing neighborhoods that are really changing as we speak. And not only those neighborhoods, but the whole state now, right? We're living in a booming economy when it comes to construction, right. But also a booming economy when it comes to school vouchers. Yep. And that is, pulling resources away from the school districts that are already losing students. So we have kind of like a formula for disaster, if you will, in the next few years. And what we really need are elected officials and decision makers to center those that are most impacted by these realities to make sure that we take action. I mean, it wouldn't be too painful for us to talk about the fact that when we increase wages, families have a better opportunity to choose where to live, where to send their kids to school. That we invest in schools not only on their ability to perform on test results, but that we are also able to incentivize that schools attract the best talent in the state, right? So they pay teachers better and they want to work in these schools that are more challenging. That we pay attention as much as urgency to things like reading and math that we know that are where our students are struggling. And more importantly, look, there has been a focus on students graduating from high school and going to college, but we know also that Latino students, over half of them, are not even making it through college because we don't have the supports and the wraparound systems in the university. You know, I'm a first generation college student, like many of us are, and we don't know what to do once we get there, right? And the systems are not made for people like us. So we really had to take over decision-making places. It's time to stop waiting for people to give us, you know, the mercy or the attention or the time. And it's time for us to actually make the decisions for ourselves.
Yeah, I love how Luis transitioned the conversation into the solutions. And as we begin discussing more of the solutions, Adriana, how important is it for school districts and schools themselves to really come up with this consensus, this agreement to what a quality school is?
Yeah, well, first I want to go back to a point that Luis made that I think it's important. There are an incredible number of dynamics at the moment that are creating a sense of initially hopelessness, right? But I see this as an opportunity. I think this is the opportunity for leaders in communities, stakeholders, to take charge of the conversation around what our schools should look like and to talk about quality. Quality is not, the conversation around quality, it's new. We have not been talking about providing our families with a quality school. We've heard terms such as equity and all of these other things, but we've never sat down to define these are the things that our students need. So I would say let's take this as an opportunity and let's own this conversation. Let's engage families through the work that All in Education is doing. But then to go back to your question, I think having a level playing field and we can all understand what is expected of us, and it's not just about the system, it's also about families, right? I always say, or parents, we are the best advocate for our kids, so what are schools expecting of us? But then we should also be very clear about what we are expecting of these schools. So I think in regards to resources, to talent, which is incredibly critical at the moment, this can only be a win for education and for our kids.
So as we wrap this conversation up, what we love to do is calls to action for community leaders, leaders in education, parents, as you just mentioned. Luis, I'll start with you because you were rolling there with some calls to action for those community leaders. Can you help us kind of wrap this conversation up with your specific calls to action?
Yeah, I mean, I would make it simple. I would say it starts at the house, right? It starts in our houses, in our homes, where we have to make sure that we know how our kids are doing. And you know, my mom would be defined by the system as someone who wasn't involved in my education because she wasn't showing up physically to the school, but she was always checking to make sure that I had my homework and my grades. And you know, even though she might not understand what I was learning, you know, she was making sure that she knew what was happening. So families had a great responsibility to just check on their kids and, to be honest, just to believe in them, just to encourage them, just to give them love, because you know, we are told so often in the world that we're not worthy of attention and love, and I think families can start there. But then we go to the State House, and I think that's a really important one, and we need to know who represents us, and I mean that just by school board and legislature and government, because those folks are making decisions that are really, really impactful for us, right? But also the schoolhouse is important, so I would say go to the school, you know, meet your teacher, know how the schools are functioning. I mean, I've done tours of schools where I would never send my kid to that school because you know, they're a mess. They're a mess. And I'm like, how is it that in this country we have schools that have, you know, falling infrastructures and dirty floors and no teachers in the classroom? And, you know, we can always blame it on resources, and I think we should, but it shouldn't be divorced of investing and making sure that we're offering what we deserve. And I think that's the thing here. For too long, we've been having a conversation about let's make resources available for schools, and we haven't done the other, which is like those resources should also match the quality that our children deserve as well.
Yeah, I love the call to action to the three houses there, the family house, the schoolhouse, and the State House. Yeah. Adriana, your calls to action for the community leaders.
Well, you know, I think as a mother also in this work, I always go back to the things that we can control in our house, in our home, right? I always talk to families and I say, if you are a first generation, if you're an immigrant family in this community and in the education system, we know that there are a lot of challenges. So at home, let's be that support system for our students. Let's also set really clear expectations about what we want from them, right? It isn't a if you graduate, it is when you graduate, what are our plans? We don't need to have all of the answers, but I think laying that foundation for our kids is incredibly important. It is also important to ask them, what do they expect of us, right? Parents forget sometimes that our kids have opinions about in the way that they want to be supported, and we will be surprised if we just level set with them. So I think as parents, absolutely important. And we have to get involved in our schools. We really have to ask questions. Absolutely.
Stephanie, fantastic conversation we're having here. Help us wrap this one up with some of your calls to action.
Yeah, I mean, these are all great. And just to add, my call to action is for our educational leaders. The folks who are right now in the season of welcoming families back to school to really make sure that they are welcoming and that they're inclusive of every single family and child that they're serving, that kids feel loved and honored when they show up on day one, and also that our parents feel welcome. I think parent engagement, authentic and effective parent engagement can help a school system improve educational outcomes. We have to build that bridge between school and family, and our education leaders and our parents have a huge role to play in that. And so having that shared accountability, that shared responsibility, and doing it in a way that we are building relationship with each other is so critical going forward.
Yeah, I love how you wrapped it up kind of where you started about talking about quality education can mean so many different things, and sometimes it is just a friendly face and a welcoming face. And as a parent myself, dropping my kid off for school this morning, I thought about that. School just started, and wow, what a welcoming environment this was, dropping my daughter off for school this morning, how important that is. So thank you guys all for sharing, and we thank you for watching All in Education's Paque Sepas, the social determinants of education. As a reminder, we will continue building on the conversation every single month, bringing you a deep dive conversation on each topic. We thank you so much, Stephanie, Adriana, Luis, for sharing your knowledge on the topic. And I know, Stephanie, we want to thank our sponsors for making this happen.
Yes, our sponsor for Paque Sepas, the Garcia Family Foundation. We're so grateful to their support. It is the reason why we're able to put this series on, so appreciate the partnership.
Yes, we thank the Garcia Family Foundation so much. Make sure you tune in next month as we continue to discuss how poverty impacts education. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.